Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Yes indeed, time for another rock and read. Today we will continue our journey through the book No Regrets by Ace Frehley from Kiss. We're on chapter 12. Chapter 12 is super long, so I split it into two parts. Now, let's see how part 1 unfolds. So, we're on this giant roller coaster at Magic Mountain. Just me and my friend Don Wusley, the vice president of marketing for Casablanca Records, and his daughter. I've been a coaster fanatic my whole life. From the time I was growing up in New York, riding the old wooden coaster at Coney Island. I love the speed, the excitement, the carefully controlled sense of chaos and impending doom. Roller coasters are safe and fun, but they feel just a little bit dangerous. I seek them out on the road in the same way that some people look for museums or art galleries or great restaurants. The brand new Colossus at Magic Mountain, a towering double tracker with 2 stomach-churning drops in excess of 100 vertical feet, is on the must-ride list for any coaster nut, and I certainly qualify. So we're standing in line, chatting casually as the crowd snakes its way along, all of us willing to wait nearly an hour for the chance to spend 2 or 3 minutes on the Colossus. By the time we finally get to the point where you enter the roller coaster, the Southern California sky has turned gray and a light sprinkle has begun to fall. Oh man, I say to Don, yeah, bad luck. Protocol usually dictates that rides are shut down almost immediately in the event of bad weather. But the Colossus is new and easily the star attraction at Magic Mountain. A bunch of college students are operating the ride, and everyone in line is about having wasted an hour without getting their roller coaster rocks off. Come on, one more trip, someone shouts. Yeah, it's not that bad. The college students relent and open the gate, and pretty soon we're chugging up the first hill, the clackety-clack of the tracks filling the air. My heart begins to race, as it always does on the first ascent. But then, just as we reach the peak, something happens. The weather worsens. Suddenly, the rain starts coming down more heavily, and we're roaring down the first drop, the rain splashing against our faces. People are screaming, but I'm not sure they understand what's going on. As we hit the first turn, I can tell we're going faster than normal. Usually you can feel the brakes on a coaster, but here there's a palpable sense of acceleration at a point when we should be slowing down. Oh! Especially on these great old woodies, you can often feel the brakes at work and even hear the squeaking sound. Now, however, there is next to nothing. Just the sound of people screaming, and then a faint disturbing noise of metal on metal, the sound of brakes failing. You don't need a PhD in physics to understand what's happening. The rain has seeped into the brake system and rendered it virtually useless. I realize now, as we approach one of the last turns on the ride, that we're reaching a very dangerous speed, a speed that feels like the coaster might even jump off the track. Finally, as the coaster straightens out into the last stretch of the ride, I let out a sigh of relief, thinking we've just barely escaped a major catastrophe. Unfortunately, the feeling is short-lived, because as soon as we enter the straightaway where we're supposed to slow down and exit, it becomes apparent that we aren't exiting anything, and my worst fears are suddenly realized. We won't be getting off this coaster from hell, and hell is where we all might end up if things don't change quickly. Don and his daughter are laughing out loud. They seem completely unaware of how serious the situation really is, but it's apparent to me that we're in big trouble. Everyone else gets the point soon enough, as the coaster roars right through the exit station. There's fear now on the faces of the riders, but it's also on the faces of the college students operating the ride, coupled with a helpless look of bewilderment. The brakes have been rendered almost inoperable from the rain, and a hopeless feeling suddenly consumes everyone. We again begin climbing the 100-foot peak, listening to the clanking of the giant train drive pulling us upward, closer and closer to the summit. Our situation seems grave. What horror awaits us after the first drop? I think, maybe it's time to start praying. And I'm not alone. Now people are really getting scared. Everyone is aware of our predicament, especially since the skies have really opened. A driving rain beats against the coaster. This no longer seems like a benign thrill. I ask myself, is this a dream? It can't really be happening. Have I entered the twilight zone? We're falling again now, faster than ever, careening through turns seemingly out of control. No brakes, no hope of stopping, and moving at a speed far exceeding the safety limits of the ride, seemingly in some sort of crazy spiral. Some riders on the coaster are screaming their brains out, while others are completely silent, with a blank look of fear mixed with panic and confusion. We're all wondering whether we're going to jump the track and end up mangled somewhere far below. Soon, though, by the grace of God, we're approaching the final turn again, just before the track straightens out and funnels into the exit station. The brakes aren't squeaking anymore. They've probably been literally sheared off by the friction produced by the runaway ride. The attendants are standing there together, 5 or 6 of them, arguing about what to do. I twist in my seat and try to get their attention. Shut it down! What? Turn off the motor, you idiots! Again, we start ascending to the top of the giant tower to an almost certain horrific ending. Suddenly, everything stops. No more clanking sound from the chain drive. No more screams from the riders. A weird calm overtakes everyone. Apparently, the operators have finally done what they should have done in the first place. Cut the power to the giant motor running the chain drive. The coaster stops in its tracks. We're stuck on the first giant hill. A little scary, but preferable to the alternative. The horror show is over. After a while, security guards ascend the catwalk, accompanied by sighs of relief and cheers of happiness from all concerned. Slowly and carefully, one at a time, the guards escort us down the narrow catwalk to safety. Don is holding his daughter, who is visibly shaken. She's not the only one. I've never been on a runaway roller coaster before, and it occurs to me for a moment that it's the perfect metaphor for the way I feel in general right now. Like my life is completely out of control. As if being in KISS is a lot like riding a roller coaster that just won't stop, and there is nothing I can do about it. Is this a lesson from someone trying to reach me and make me realize my predicament? A messenger in the form of a giant machine? Maybe so, but I won't realize it or act upon it until much later. The pace never slowed. We released 2 more studio albums in a span of 7 months. Rock and Roll Over in November 1976 and Love Gun in June 1977. In less than 3.5 years, KISS had funneled an incredible amount of music into the marketplace. 6 studio albums and 1 double live record. We never stopped touring either. Sometimes the road was a blast. Sometimes it was a drag. And once in a while, it was dangerous. Just a few weeks after the release of Rock and Roll Over, on December 12, 1976 to be precise, at the start of a show at the Lakeland, Florida Civic Center, I was electrocuted. Here's how it happened. We were supposed to enter the stage by walking down a set of stairs. Every entrance involving stairs was a challenge for us, given the platform shoes we wore. Usually we'd hold tightly to the railing to make sure we didn't slip or fall. Well, on this particular night, my guitar wasn't appropriately grounded, so when I touched the metal railing on the staircase, I got hit with a big dose of electricity. I didn't even get to the stage before it happened. I was just about to start going down, and I touched the railing at the top of the staircase and got thrown backwards onto the platform above the ramps. I don't think the other guys in the band even realized what had happened. Maybe they just thought I had slipped or something. They continued to march toward the stage and began playing. Meanwhile, I was flat on my back, stunned nearly to the point of unconsciousness. Some guys from our road crew quickly picked me up and carried me down the back staircase, while the band kept playing. I was out of it for a while. I had burns on my fingertips. That's how much voltage there was. Eventually, the guys realized I wasn't coming out, and they stopped the show and came back behind the amps to check on me. I hadn't even gone back to the dressing room yet. I was just sitting there, disoriented, trying to get my bearings. As my head cleared, I could hear the audience chanting, "We want Ace! We want Ace!" That got my adrenaline going, and after about 5 more minutes or so, I went back out and played the entire concert. I had a nasty headache, and my fingers were a little numb, but what the hell? The show must go on, right? We all performed at less than peak physical condition at one time or another. There were a few occasions when I could hardly walk because of knee pain, and one of the docs would come backstage and shoot me up with needles, and I'd go out and play. Paul was sick plenty of times, and they'd shoot him up with something to get him through the show. When you got 20,000 seats sold, you do whatever you can to get out on the stage. That's just the way it works. If there was one good thing to come out of that night, it was the fact that it provided the impetus for one of my favorite Kiss songs, and the first on which I had the balls to sing lead. The guys had urged me to write about my shocking experience, and while electricity runs through the song and did indeed provide the initial spark of inspiration, the end result is a tune that's less about getting fried on stage than it is about getting laid afterward. A good Kiss song, in other words. Shock me, make me feel better, oh yeah. Come on and shock me, put on your black leather. Baby, I'm down to the bare wire. Shock me, we can come together. Thanks to the return of Eddie Kramer, my favorite producer and engineer, Rock and Roll Over was a more enjoyable experience than Destroyer had been. It's a good record, more true to the original Kiss mission than Destroyer had been, and helped placate some of the fans who were angered by the studio gimmicks of Bob Ezrin on Destroyer. Rock and Roll Over was an unqualified success, shipping platinum and producing another hit single sung by Peter, Hard Luck Woman, as well as Calling Dr. Love, which would become something of a Kiss classic. Eddie wanted a return to the raw sound of earlier Kiss albums, so we recorded the album live at the old Nanuet Star Theater in Rockland County, about 20 miles north of New York City, and then mixed it at the record plant. The acoustics at the Star were incredible, and Eddie had us use every inch of the place, setting up instruments in different places to get different types of sounds. At one point, he even had Peter playing drums in the bathroom. There was also another really nice feature about recording in Nanuet. I had recently married Jeanette, and we had settled in Tarrytown, New York, which was just across the Hudson River. All I had to do was roll out of bed and shoot west across the Tappan Zee Bridge, and I was there in 10 minutes. I think my guitar playing on Rock and Roll Over is solid, and I know that I felt more connected to the album while we were recording. That's probably due to Eddie as much as anything else. But the truth is that while I liked the record a lot, it was the first Kiss album on which I did not contribute a single composition. I didn't feel good about that. I thought of myself as a writer as well as a guitar player, and I had no one but myself to blame. Yeah, it's true that in any band with 4 strong personalities and big egos, there's a certain amount of time spent marking your territory. Everybody wants to write and sing. Everybody wants the spotlight. I was no different. But if you're not bringing material to the table, you can't really complain, can you? So I sat down and wrote Shock Me. Everyone loved it and agreed that it belonged on the next album, Love Gun. My initial thought, as usual, was to turn it over to Gene or Paul and let them handle the vocals. To my surprise, they resisted. You should sing this one yourself, Paul said. It's way overdue. And that's how I wound up flat on my back on the floor of a studio at the record plant, trying to relax, with the lights turned down low and Eddie Kramer at the board, encouraging me to sing from the gut. Which is exactly what I did. I like Love Gun a lot. I'm proud of the whole album. There are a few things on it, though, that really make me smile. Like some of my leads, and the vocals on Shock Me. It never actually occurred to me until that album that I was a viable singer. What I learned is that you don't have to be a trained vocalist to be a rock singer, any more than you have to be a classically trained musician to play guitar. Just believe in what you're doing, and the audience will go along for the ride. Looking back on it now, there are a lot of things about the Kiss marketing machine that make me laugh, and a few that make me cringe. Every time I thought we had reached a new high or low, the bar was moved ever so slightly. In every copy of Love Gun, for example, we included a page of Kiss tattoos that were actual duplicates of tattoos we had on our arms. That was a good one, cheap and effective. More expensive and more ambitious by miles was the first Kiss comic book, produced by Marvel Comics in 1977. We got to meet the great Stan Lee, creator of Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. I thought Stan was cool, but Gene was the real fanboy, trailing Stan around and asking him questions about everything he had written over the last 30 years. Gene was and is a comic book fanatic. He told me once that when he first arrived in the United States from Israel, the first thing he learned to read was a comic book. I guess he never stopped, which at least partially explains how he came up with his character for Kiss. I was a little bit of a fan, but I could take them or leave them. I was intrigued by the superhero aspect of comic books, but it was the artwork that really grabbed my attention. Predictably, the Kiss comic book wasn't allowed to simply sneak into the marketplace. Like everything else we did, its birth was accompanied by a wild publicity stunt. We all gathered at the printing plant in Buffalo, New York, where the comic would be produced, and together we each donated a vial of blood, which we then poured into a vat of red ink, which was mixed in with the actual ink that would be used to print the comic books. I'm not sure exactly what this was supposed to signify, but as a marketing stunt, it worked beautifully. Fans thought it was awesome, critics thought it was ridiculous, and conservative and religious groups were repulsed, claiming that the stunt provided further evidence that Kiss was doing the devil's work, and that possibly we were vampires. To which we could only reply, bull. The marketing silliness reached a peak of sorts with Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, a 1978 made-for-television movie with a plot so ridiculous that I started laughing just thinking about it. We played superhero versions of ourselves, locked in a battle with a demented scientist bent on taking over a popular amusement park by creating 4 androids that looked just like us. How could anyone make this up? It wasn't the greatest movie, but that never bothered me, because I wasn't under the impression that anyone expected it to be anything other than a ridiculous farce, including the people who wrote, directed, and produced it. If you look at it now, the movie seems kind of campy and cool. The problem is, it wasn't meant to be that way. I watch it now and get a kick out of it, but I know Gene is embarrassed about it. Then again, Gene takes everything so seriously, Which is ironic, since he was the one who always claimed to be happy that Kiss was selling out arenas and moving millions of records without regard for artistic integrity. How the hell do you make a movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park and expect people not to laugh? I also heard that when he saw This Is Spinal Tap, he didn't think it was very funny. To each his own. I personally thought it was hysterical. There were a lot of bad ideas surrounding that TV movie project. The main one being, who in their right mind thought the four guys in Kiss could act? I suppose you could argue that all rock stars are actors, and obviously, more than a few of them have made successful transitions to the big screen. In Kiss, we were already wearing makeup and portraying characters whenever we went on stage, so maybe it seemed like we'd have an easier time than most. When I first heard about the project, I thought it sounded like it might be kind of fun. But I didn't take it seriously at all, and in very short order, I discovered that acting was a lot less interesting and enjoyable than I suspected. I should have had some idea what to expect when I got the original script and discovered that I didn't have a single line of dialogue. Not one. Every time my character was supposed to speak, the only thing that would come out of his mouth was the sound of a parrot. Awk! That's exactly what was written on the page. 3 capital letters. A-W-K. Awk! I guess the writers had picked up on a quirk of my personality, although I'm not sure where they got the information. Sometimes when I'd get loaded and didn't want to engage in conversation, I'd mimic the squawk of a parrot until the other person gave up and went away. Pretty silly, I admit, and that was the Ace Frehley persona the screenwriters wanted to present. Or maybe they just thought I was too stoned or drunk to remember any of my lines, so they tried to keep it as simple as possible. When I first saw the script, I didn't know what to think. Was it a joke? If so, I didn't find it particularly amusing. What the is this? I asked Bill. I've got no lines in this stupid movie. Why am I wasting my time? He laughed. What do you want me to do, Ace? Tell them to rewrite it. They did, and almost magically, I had the ability to talk. I even had amazing superpowers that allowed me to transport the whole band at will to another location. So I took a deep breath and decided to give the project my best shot. A lot of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park was filmed on location at Magic Mountain, where we actually performed a somewhat staged Kiss concert, although most of the interior scenes were done at Culver City Studios. Regardless of where we were filming, I had to be on set at 8 o'clock in the morning, which was a complete drag for me in those days. The band was staying at a posh hotel in Beverly Hills, a good 45 minutes away by car. And it wasn't like I was getting 8 hours of beauty sleep each night. I was busy being Ace, hitting the clubs, sometimes partying until the wee hours. Who the hell wants to get up at 7 a.m. with a hangover? Not me, that's for sure. Especially when I never knew exactly how much of my time would be required. It didn't take long to figure out that most of the movie-making process was about hanging out in your trailer all day, waiting for someone to tell you that you were needed on the set. A couple of times during the movie, I arrived bright and early, threw on my makeup and costume, and got all ready to go, and then sat in my trailer. After an hour or two, one of the assistant directors would stop by and say, "You know what, Ace? We're doing some close-ups on Gene this morning, so I don't think we're going to need you until after lunch. Why don't you relax for a while?" That really made me crazy. Here I was, one of the stars of the film, and you'd think maybe they could have been a little more considerate? Maybe let me know the night before? Don't these people plan? Truth is, I was doing a lot of coke at the time, and my nerves were becoming frayed to say the least. I was getting an ounce delivered to my trailer about once a week. The delivery boy was actually one of the actors on the set. He had a minor role in the film. It was really nuts. We each had our own trailer to hang in. I filled my fridge with cold beer and champagne, and since there was a lot of downtime, I indulged in the white powder frequently and followed up with whatever was handy. You'd be surprised what was handy on a movie set in Los Angeles in the 70s. The actor supplying me used to put the Coke in his character's hat and act like we were buddies just having a cold one together in my trailer. He actually went on to become a pretty well-known character actor down the road, with roles in several big Hollywood hits. For the most part, I was clueless. I didn't realize that this was the way movies worked, that downtime was a big part of an actor's day, maybe the biggest part. And so the third or fourth time that it happened, I snapped. Totally went off on the producer. When confronted, he really didn't have much to say in his defense in regard to how the shooting schedule was being handled, which didn't make me feel any better. "This," I said to myself, then I shouted, "I'm out of here," which, as I realize now, was extremely unprofessional behavior. I went back into my trailer, quickly washed off my makeup and changed into my regular clothes, snorted a couple lines and washed it down with a cold one, and then jumped into my Mercedes. I drove quietly off the lot, trying not to attract too much attention, but in the rearview mirror, I could see my bodyguard and road manager in hot pursuit. Well, not so hot, actually. I let them follow me for a while as I bided my time until we got into a more familiar area. The traffic was becoming dense, and I began making lefts and rights, slowly and methodically trying to lose them, until finally I just hit the gas and pulled away, leaving them stuck behind a truck at a red light. The next thing I knew, I was on my own, somewhere in the suburbs of Los Angeles, hanging out at a bar, washing down some tranquilizers with a beer. I calmed down after a while, and soon began feeling very guilty about sounding off to the producer. Hell, he had only been doing his job, and I was making it harder for him. Maybe the script and schedule changes had occurred that morning, and there was nothing he could do about it. And I was acting like a spoiled brat. I realized now that all the coke and alcohol was really starting to affect my judgment and how I perceived life in general, not just within the band. But now I faced a dilemma. Do I run back with my tail between legs, or skip a day of shooting and hope it all blows over? I had similar experiences that time with Kiss. Something would piss me off, and I'd lose my temper and disappear for a while. I didn't really like confrontation, so I'd just go off on my own and medicate myself until I felt better. It was typical behavior for an addict. I see that so clearly now. Unfortunately, I was oblivious to my actions at the time. In any case, for some strange reason that day, I left the bar and decided to get some fresh air. The sun was shining, but not too hot, and it seemed to improve my mood. I wound up cruising by the La Brea Tar Pits, which is one of the coolest places on earth. I parked the car and got out and began walking around, trying to forgive and forget what had happened earlier. Suddenly, I noticed a huge sign promoting a new exhibition at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, which is located just down the block. I stopped in my tracks. Holy! The King Tut exhibit was in town. A little background is probably warranted here. I've always been fascinated with the pyramids and Egyptian culture. I remember reading a book as a teen called Pyramid Power that captured my imagination, and since then I had dreamed of visiting the pyramids. This time the Tutankhamun exhibition was touring the United States and attracting massive crowds wherever it went. Everybody wanted to see the golden mask and the artifacts of the boy king. People would stand in line for hours in cities around the world. A novelty song by Steve Martin called King Tut was a hit single that year. Tut Mania gripped the nation. I know because I had a pretty good dose of it myself. Funny thing is, I had completely forgotten that the exhibit was going to be in LA while we were filming Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, so I was completely taken aback when I stumbled across it that day. I thought to myself, wow, if I could just get in there, everything will be all right. But you couldn't get in without a ticket, and that day's exhibition had sold out weeks in advance. I wandered around outside the museum for a while, staring at the window, trying to imagine what it looked like inside, until suddenly a young woman approached me. "Excuse me, sir." She was probably in her early 30s, with a couple of people in tow. "Yes?" "Would you like to go inside? I have an extra ticket." "Really?" I asked. "How much do you want for it?" She smiled and shook her head. "That's okay. You just enjoy the show." She pulled the ticket out of her purse and placed it in my hand. Then she walked away, leaving me standing there alone, dumbstruck by my good fortune. This lady could have scalped that ticket for a couple $100. I would have paid that much. Instead, she gave it away, and I don't think she had any idea who I was. I was just a guy with long hair hanging out in front of the Museum of Art, looking like he needed a ticket for the King Tut exhibit. Who was she, really? Possibly a messenger sent from above intervening in my life? I have no idea, but this kind of thing has happened to me before, too often for it to be dismissed or coincidence. People come out of nowhere to provide assistance or demonstrate kindness. A mysterious luck seems to always pull me out of deep. Luck and guardian angels have always been something I felt were with me, and I believe they still are today. 5 minutes later, I was inside the museum, wandering around, blissfully soaking up the Egyptian atmosphere, looking at all these fascinating artifacts, feeling like I had been transported thousands of years back into the past. By the time I walked out of the museum some 3 hours later, I felt completely at ease with myself and the world around me. Thinking back now about that afternoon and remembering how upset I was before visiting the exhibit, there are really only 2 words that best describe what happened to me: divine intervention. Well, that concludes part 1. Let me know what you thought of part 1 in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.